Thank you. Right, Alex, we'll hand over to you. Just nice and close to that microphone, please.
How's that? Can everyone hear me okay? Can hear the echo? And how do I advance this? Yes. Okay. So I've got about 10 slides, including the first one that we already flipped through. So this will be fairly brief and fairly high level, introductory in nature. Appreciate that. Oh, sorry. Appreciate that there's a lot of questions and issues that need to be discussed in more detail, and so we're happy to have the opportunity to come back anytime and speak more to those when there's more time. I'll start, just tell you a little bit what we propose to give you in terms of some information today. A little bit of background on the two companies that are here today, Apache, represented by Apache Canada, and TAG Oil. I'll go through a little bit of the overall program that we've mapped out and hope to proceed with. And one of the questions we get quite a bit is, when will we start planning for an environment where there's potentially production of oil and gas in the area? So there's some ideas and thoughts there that we've been answering when we've been asked, so I thought I'd share those with everyone here. And an opportunity for any questions or discussion that you may want to throw at us. So a bit of the history here. A few years ago, I don't exactly know when, the exploration permits that you referred to were acquired by TAG Oil. TAG Oil is a Canadian company. They're based, head office is there, but all their operations are in New Zealand. So I'm not exactly sure why that is, but their sole operating area is over in the Taranaki area on the other coast. Apache Corporation, as some of you may know, is a fairly large organization. I happen to work for Apache Canada, which is one of the larger arms of that, and that's the organization through which Apache is organized to try to operate down here. So we've formed a partnership. We started negotiating that sometime early summer, perhaps, last year. We signed an agreement with TAG, who owns the permits, or the exploration permits. I think it was August. We made it in September. And we signed the agreement. And the agreement is a structured way of us coming into the opportunity that TAG owns in terms of owning the exploration permits. It's a significant exploration project in terms of the factors that are unknown. So it's high risk from a financial perspective, and also in terms of the expertise, the kind of resource that we're looking for here requires a particular kind of expertise, and TAG is honestly a much smaller company, so we're looking for a partner to come in both with capital to support the program as well as the expertise in this kind of operation. So we got together, we formed an agreement, and the agreement is structured over a three-phase program that I'll explain, and we're hoping to be able to get through the entire program. So I mentioned the contract or the agreement we have with TAG Oil is a phased-in exploration program. A lot of that is, from an explorer's perspective, at this point we've got some hints that there's an oil resource out there. You want to be a little cautious, or I'm a little cautious. I work in an exploration group, and we are, I think, the most optimistic people in the world. So when we say there's some caution, it might be there. Generally speaking, the average geologist or petroleum engineer would say, no way, there's nothing there to look for. So we're at the head of the spear in the company looking for this kind of resource opportunity. We've taken kind of a phased approach for a number of reasons. One, at this point, we don't know whether there's any resource down there. So we thought, well, let's do the first phase where we'll actually just test some of the existing hints and ideas that are out there. If we do find oil in there, then we would trigger going into phase 2. If we go down there, hopefully with this test well program, and we don't find oil, then we are done. We essentially wrap up and leave. So that the first test is pretty critical part of the phase to determine how we move from there. If we trigger going into phase 2, and I'll explain in more detail some of the timeframes, but if we trigger going into phase 2 under the agreement we have with TAG, we essentially, Apache will own 50% of a very small area of the larger permit area. But also phase 2 is an opportunity now that we've understood that there's oil there, the opportunity in phase 2 for us is to determine whether or not it is of commercial nature. So, and that's a pretty important thing. Presence or absence of any resource is one thing, but you know, honestly, we're in a business environment, so we're hoping that it's a profitable opportunity, so we have to test that thinking as well. If we go through phase 2, which will take about 18 months after we're done phase 1, we will shift into a phase 3. And the trigger, if we move into phase 3, will, under the agreement, make Apache an owner of 50% of a larger area, if that makes sense, the way I describe it. And in phase 3, all we're doing at that point is trying to understand, given the coarse geological information and some of the historical seismic work that's been done here, and all those hints that I talked about, what is the extent of the resource play here? Because we actually at this point don't know. It's pretty coarse information. And if we determine from an Apache perspective that the resource is there, it's commercially viable, and it's large enough in terms of an extent, then we will complete phase 3 and sign into a full-time development opportunity, at which point we will own 50% of the overall permit area. And at that point, we would be looking to start up a production type of, instead of an exploration project, it then becomes a resource development project.
Mr. Chair, is it okay to ask questions online?
Sure.
I actually think you should go through and then we'll have your questions at the end. So note them down, Councillor, if we'll ask them.
I can come back to this as well. I thought I'd talk a little bit in more detail about phase 1. And as you recall, I mentioned phase 1 is about understanding if there's oil down there. And to give you an idea, some of the hints that we look at as an exploration group, some of the reservoir that we're looking for, because it's not flat, folds up and comes to the surface in a few areas, and they're readily available. If you go and find some of that material on the surface and you hit it with a hammer, you can smell oil in it. So from an optimistic standpoint, that's a pretty good idea that there may be oil down there. But again, at 2,000 meters underground, it could be a totally different scenario. So it's hints. There's also been 44 odd wells drilled on the East Coast in the last 100 years, not necessarily successfully and not into the zone that we're looking for, but it's all provided a variety of bits of data that has helped us determine whether or not we want to come into this program or not. Phase 1, what we're hoping to do is to do some seismic work, which we have done under the exploration permit, which is an opportunity to get a better realistic picture of what the subsurface looks like, where it goes. The seismic program is a kind of a sonar. The analogy might be a submarine sonar system, but on land, obviously. And it just tells us where those different rock layers are as you go down. It doesn't necessarily tell you what's in them. It just looks at densities and that, given what we understand from some of the past wells and information, it gives us an idea of where that zone is that we're interested in, where it goes, at what depth. One of the things that's important for us is we're not looking for anything too shallow. and we're not looking for anything too deep. And the reason is we're looking for an oil resource that's at a significant pressure by itself, natural pressure from earth pushing down, of course, and also any lateral stresses in the resource itself. That pressure is important because the oil, given the nature that we see on the surface, is fairly well fractured in nature. So we're kind of thinking, well, it might flow on its own, which would be a great cost benefit to us. So we'll, the seismic program, make sure that where we want to proceed with a test well program, that we're not missing and going too deep. If we go too deep, pressures, temperatures become too great. You know, you get to a certain depth, and also it's very expensive to drill that deep, so we're not really interested in that. So we're looking at somewhere, anything, and this is, of course, a statement, anything between 1,500 meters and 2,500 meters is kind of the area, the depth that we're looking for. So the seismic makes sure that when we drill down, that we actually hit the reservoir that we're looking for in that depth. Otherwise, we'll have missed the target on the test well. So part of phase 1-2 is to follow that seismic up with a couple of two down here, two proposed up in the north permit area around Gisborne. I think one in this jurisdiction and one in Horizons region area. And these are vertical test wells. We're hoping to get down into the reservoir so we can truly begin to understand whether or not there's oil there. Key question is presence or absence of oil. So they're not production wells, if that makes sense. The idea is under the terms of the contract with TAG, we have a trigger point, a decision by year end 2012. So we've got a bit of time to analyze, and of course we'll be, from an Apache perspective, it's a pretty expensive venture, so we'll be looking to do a lot of tests on the results from the test wells and make sure that we're doing the right thing by going into phase 2. So that's, in detail, that's phase 1, and I think that's probably our where we're at. In terms of the details of phase 2, we honestly don't know much about phase 2 because we don't have the results from phase 1 yet. But phase 2, just to give you an idea of what we're thinking, we'll probably do a little bit more seismic work to make sure we understand where things are under the surface. And we'll drill a well that more or less mimics what you might see in a production environment. So it'll be a horizontal well. It'll go down and then across into staying within the reservoir that we're looking for. And again, we're looking for that same depth. That's pretty important to us. So a little bit of seismic work will help make sure we actually do that properly. And that'll be about an 18-month process to go through that and the analysis of data from that phase. And at which point, if we trigger phase 3, if we do end up going to phase 3, we will be looking at probably, and could be different north or south because we don't have an understanding yet. Potentially we could be looking at a couple of additional test wells up north. And all we're doing there is testing our knowledge of where the reservoir actually goes, how far away. So they'll be quite a ways away from the one well program in phase 2, if that makes sense. So we're not, there's no detailed planning or information I could provide for you at this point on phase 2 or phase 3, just that course summary of what our exploration program looks like going forward. One of the things we've been doing since coming into the agreement in August, regular trips down here into New Zealand. Great time of year to be coming to New Zealand from Canada. And I'm told it stays this way all year round, so that's great. We've been spending a lot of time. We haven't applied for the consents yet, and so we've been trying to get around as much as we can. Understand the regulatory processes. It's fairly new to us. We have a lot of good people helping us locally that have been through the consenting process, so that's given us a bit of confidence. We've spent a lot of time with landowners in the area. Certainly the seismic has kept us pretty busy on that. We've been engaged with all the iwi groups up and down in our areas and trying to understand what it is that we need to do there and getting some advice and direction from them. And essentially coming, things like this and coming to talk to people as much as we can and kind of let them know what we're trying to do here in terms of an exploration program. We do, the last point there on the slide is a little important to us. Certainly from an Apache perspective, I can speak. We try to take a very cautionary approach to telling people that there's a gold mine out there or something. There's been a lot of this. The very nature of exploration is there's a significant chance there's nothing there. For us, it's a risk venture. So we're telling people, don't get too excited. Don't go invest in things that you think is going to lead to a huge return. If that assumes that there needs to be oil there or a resource, because it may not happen. And generally speaking, from our experience, and I think you can talk to any exploration company, they'll tell you the same. It's given the limited data that's out there on what's there, it's about a 1 in 5 chance. And again, we're pretty optimistic. 1 in 5 chance that there's a resource here that you'll see us back here into phase 2. So, a bit of a cautionary tale. So, but it's one of the things we have been asked several times is talking about, okay, what if there is oil there, and what's going to happen? What is this going to look like? What's in it, for my community? All those kind of questions start swirling around. So one of the reasons we've structured this in a phase and kind of elongated, because as you can imagine, for a company like Apache, it doesn't take 18 months to drill a couple of test wells. I think each of them take to actually do the operation about 3 weeks. So, but we're providing ourselves an 18-month window under the contract, hopefully to get through it. But we're spending a lot of time. Phase 1, as I show here on the slide, very important, determine the presence or absence of the resource itself. That's our job in terms of the technical side. Once we're down there, we have an opportunity. We've got a reservoir. Does it flow? Will it move? We'll get a little bit of information as well. You'll see us also test the rock all the way down as we're drilling, and that'll give us a pretty good perspective of what we have in front of us. Also provides a legacy for other explorers that may want to come and try to understand what's there. We spent a lot of time in phase 1 engaging with those directly affected, because again, we want to get people too excited or anxious as much as we can. We'll talk about local employment. We've employed a bunch of local folks on the seismic surveying crew. We'll be looking for local services related to the drilling operation. But again, it's pretty important to note that it's a 3-week, 4-week process on the outside, so there's not a long-term employment opportunity with a test well. And again, that's why I mentioned it's a cautionary story on that economic opportunity piece right now. And part of it is just openly communicating what we're finding as we go through there. Well, one of the commitments we've made with all the iwi groups that we've been talking with is typically in this kind of play, you'll find a company that will not share results because it's highly commercially confidential. And but we're more than happy to have people see the results as we get them out of the rig. Of course, there'll be some analysis that have to be done, but essentially our commitment, because it is a significant interest to everyone in New Zealand, you will know when we know whether there's oil down there. Phase 2, we've got another 18 months if you fast forward a little bit, if we go into phase 2. Well, certainly from our perspective, we'll be looking hard at how we performed in phase 1. That's really the trigger point. We want to continue and have an ongoing community engagement process. rather than just once and drill and leave, because we are trying to build for a potential future as well. But I think phase two is when there should be more discussion around what that potential future may look like in a production oil and gas environment. Now that we find oil down there, it's probably time to start talking about choices around that. So again, we'll continue on the test well and the phase two program, engage with those directly affected. You know, there's the time to start building discussions around what longer-term employment or services opportunities there are in the area. And again, we are testing the potential commercial feasibility of the reservoir. And our commitment is the same. We're happy to share what we find on that test. And essentially, you will know when we know whether or not it's a commercial opportunity. And phase three, now we're just testing the extent of it. It's still pretty important for us to understand that. Again, phase three would be that third 18-month window. That would be the opportunity to really sit down and start having focused discussions with the right people, everyone that needs to be involved around what this might look like down the road. Because we've got, you know, obviously a lot more confidence as we proceed through the phases. And again, phase three will be the same. You'll know when we know. But really, I think phase three is a significant opportunity and need to really try to understand what this might mean for the community in terms of, you know, the future picture.